Yeah, if you don't mind
Beautiful.
me asking a quick question, Josh Sigurdson from World Alternative Media here. Max, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. A lot of gold bugs and silver bugs. I'm a big fan of both gold and silver, of course, but a lot of people don't understand is we're not going back in time. Things are going digital, whether we like it or not. And we could either pick between a centrally planned cashless society or a decentralized, unconfiscatable, uncensorable future, and the importance of that point going forward, the differentiation between, because obviously there's going to be people listening that haven't looked into cryptocurrency much over the years, just hearing about Bitcoin mooning right now, and they're like, oh, I got to look into this finally, after telling people it was too late for the last 5 years. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the importance of the differentiation between, for example, what China's doing with social credit and, the enforcement of bank-backed digital currencies, and then the importance of decentralized cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, going forward.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, but let's start with gold. So gold is also um, doesn't need a state. It's not a state-backed money, right? It's universally accepted. You can go anywhere in the world and use gold. Gold is accepted as money. The problem with gold is that it has to be verified by a third party, because a lot of times the gold that you're receiving, and it's hard to know whether it's real gold. It could be fake gold. It could be tungsten wrapped in gold. It could be the weight could be wrong, etc. It could be stolen gold. You don't know. So that's an issue. It also has to be transported. That's a cost. It has to be insured. That's also a cost. And it's easy to confiscate. Gold, in 1933, gold was confiscated by Americans, 8,000 tons. That's what is in Fort Knox. Fort Knox is the gold that FDR confiscated from Americans back in the 30s. So let's look at Bitcoin. So it doesn't need to be verified. The transaction is the verification. It's a bearer instrument with no verification required. And it's on the completely transparent Bitcoin blockchain that is visible to all. It doesn't, the transportation and cost of transacting is minuscule. If you were to move $1 billion worth of gold, I was talking to a gold dealer about this last week. It would cost about $75,000, $80,000 if you really got a good price to move $1 billion worth of gold. The cost of somebody moving gold last week, they paid $2.50 to move $1 billion worth of Bitcoin through the Bitcoin network. And by the way, since the beginning of the Bitcoin network, over $10 trillion worth of Bitcoin is transacted. So it is a highly active value transference mechanism. Thirdly, with gold, anyway, the Bitcoin is superior to gold in these ways. And as you point out, it has these additional attributes that are better, that make it better than gold. It is this decentralized versus gold tends to be very centralized. Central banks own 33,000 tons of the above ground supply of 160,000 tons. So it is somewhat centralized, and the centralization of that gold also kind of fits to different power centers. Obviously, Fort Knox has 8,000 tons of gold, and it is backed and connected to the U.S. power structure, which, as alluded to before, does end up going back to the Pentagon, et cetera. So you don't have any of those, any of that associated with Bitcoin. So it's decentralized, as you point out, and it is used in this electronic age, in this digital age. It can be used brilliantly as a gold substitute. It also can be used as a fiat money substitute as well. People say that, well, Visa and MasterCard, the transactions are very fast and they can handle a lot of transactions, but people don't realize that when you use a credit card, at the point of sale is not the final settlement of that transaction. It usually takes 2 or 3 days for both banks to settle that trade. There's counterparty risk, and there's also censorship risk. Julian Assange, of course, his credit cards were cut off. PayPal was cut off. The U.S. dollar is used, the censorship of the U.S. dollar is used by the federal government with the SWIFT system. With Bitcoin, there is no censorship. You cannot censor a transaction, unlike Visa, unlike PayPal, unlike MasterCard, or even the global SWIFT system. So that's why these countries that are on the periphery of the American empire are using and getting involved in Bitcoin, because they are getting out of the U.S. dollar hegemony that is ruling the world. And they really, that's why, you know, for better or worse, Iran is now like 2 or 3% of global hash rate of Bitcoin. You've got Nigeria was huge, the second most trafficked Bitcoin site in the world because they just leapfrogged out of the total global banking system. The government just made some comments this week, which we can get into, but nevertheless, it's a huge market. Kazakhstan owns a lot of Bitcoin. Several other countries are into Bitcoin. So they're outside of the U.S., people are realizing that the U.S. dollar is vulnerable. Not a lot of people will say, well, what if the U.S. government bans Bitcoin? The more likely outcome is that the U.S. government will realize, like they did in the 60s during that Sputnik moment when the Soviets put up the Sputnik satellite, they entered the space race to try to compete with that technology. Similarly, once the U.S. realizes that these other countries are bolting ahead of them with the Bitcoin race, they're going to be like, we need to get into this fast. And the U.S. is going to start it's not going to ban Bitcoin. It's going to start subsidizing mining of Bitcoin and hoarding of Bitcoin to get as much Bitcoin as possible as a strategic reserve. That's the most likely outcome. And that's why this price is going crazy. Corporations realize it's a strategic reserve. They're now buying it by the billions. Soon, governments are going to realize the same thing. This is a strategic reserve. So when the governments come in with $500 billion to buy Bitcoin, you know, obviously the price is going to go up. So those are the trends that I think fit what you're asking there.
And there's a chance we might hit $50,000 while we're live with you here, which is quite interesting. Historic times indeed. The most exhaustive question that people seem to ask, it's like asking an anarchist who will build the roads, asking a Bitcoiner, you know, well, what if the electricity goes down? It's the most annoying, exhaustive question ever. But for those that have absolutely no idea what Bitcoin is, do you mind going into this exhausted question?
Well, you know, you can actually run the whole network on mesh nodes that work on batteries and radio frequencies, and you can get the Bitcoin signal from satellites. You don't need the electrical grid. The mining itself would respond to, let's say, right now you've got something like 180 quintillion calculations per second are running the Bitcoin network, the hash rate. So let's say half of those computers go down for whatever reason or more. Well, the protocol is ingenious because there's something called a difficulty adjustment every 2 weeks. It just pings the network and figures out how many computers are on the network. And if there's a huge loss of computer power, the difficulty adjustment goes down and it finds the sweet spot where of the remaining computers that are out there, it's in their incentive to keep the network going and hashing and keep the emission schedule going every 10 minutes. So, and if their electricity does go down or there's a catastrophic event like that, Bitcoin is actually the only asset anyone could ever own that's not in jeopardy, or every other asset can be confiscated. If you have a seed phrase protecting your wallet with your coin, and that's it, you could walk naked on planet Earth and have all of your wealth completely secure in Bitcoin, and no one could take it from you. Another reason why Bitcoin is very handy, when you have the seed phrase to your wallet, you could go through the airport naked and have $10 billion of Bitcoin waiting for you wherever you land by typing in your seed phrase. And that's obviously in a world that's highly volatile, that's something of great to have that ability as well. You can't do that with gold or silver. You know, you can't move. I can't take $500 million of gold into the airport. I can't take, you know, a couple $100,000 worth of gold down to the John F. Kennedy Airport, right? I can go with my seed phrase. So that is not really a risk. The loss of electricity as you're describing it, because the battery operated mesh nodes can actually operate and get the chain broadcast from satellite now. So that's no longer a risk.
To add to that, those mesh nodes are actually UHF, VHF, which is only 9,000 bits per second. So it's actually not enough to carry the actual full Bitcoin blockchain. And also the difficulty retargeting is 2016 blocks. And so if you have a reduction in hash rate, let's say by a factor of 2, that could end up becoming a month. And what ends up happening, and this is just a negative side of Bitcoin, with that long retargeting cycle, is there is potential for deflationary collapse where miners jump off, and with competitors like, I'm sorry to say it, Bcash, you know, miners following profit, they could just as easily jump off, and then the difficulty retargeting or the time between blocks is going to get longer and longer, could go to an hour or to a day if more and more power jumps off. And that's one of the negative down cycles of it potentially happening. Like Bitcoin,
Right. So
I wouldn't say it would be
especially,
immune to anything like that. I mean, there is infrastructure being developed right now. I mean,
Yeah.
we're working on that specifically too, because we love Bitcoin and we want to see Bitcoin succeed. We're Nexus doing that. But on top of that, you know, like there is physical infrastructure that we need to have right now. We run on the capital I internet, the infrastructure, which is actually developed by the CIA and ARPANET, Internet Protocol. And it's very easily centrable. We're already seeing net neutrality. Like, I mean, I try to sync some of my nodes. I get, you know, hit with CenturyLink net neutrality already. So having a physical infrastructure of our own mesh communication network is really important for Bitcoin to be fully self-sufficient. And alternative energy is another aspect, which is really cool about the elements of Bitcoin that's really driving the world in the proper direction. Is people have this massive consumption of electricity. So they're actually using geothermal electricity. They're using geothermal cooling, Arctic cooling, in order to have kind of lower footprint and increase their environmental, you know, consistency, so that they basically can make more profit by using alternative energy. So Bitcoin mining, in a way, is not doing the negative effect like some people say, is it's wasting electricity. It's actually causing people to innovate, to create new ways to bring electricity in and to communicate, such as, you know, using satellites and other things.
I just answer this question really, really quickly. I just remind people that if electricity goes out for more than 2 weeks, many nuclear reactors are going to go into meltdown. So you really have a lot bigger problems. Your Bitcoin will be just fine once electricity comes back, but you really have bigger things to worry about if there is a giant global EMP and there's no electricity.
And
Right.
try getting your money. Try getting your money if the internet and electricity. Try going to the bank and getting your money. Good luck on that.
Hey, Sam, try getting to the bank without your phone working with GPS. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure.
These are all reasons why it's important for us as Bitcoiners and crypto people to have our own infrastructure, our own communication, and our own power infrastructure, because if something like this happens, a black swan event, we can be prepared. And that's part of what I think is really important for us to do, is make sure we prepare in as many ways as possible, because I see crypto as being a fundamental technology for the future, which needs to have its own sovereign hardware in order to operate fully autonomous and to reach that prime goal of decentralization Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And in Venezuela, where I know one company is working with mesh nodes, and they're really forging ahead and developing that technology and that infrastructure, because they want to have that independence and they want to have their individual sovereignty. And there's so much work now being done on these second layer solutions and the infrastructure solutions. So I totally agree with you that we're forging ahead to get to that point where almost any catastrophic event that comes down on us would be the anti-fragility nature of the Bitcoin would be not impacted. So yeah, I would agree with that.
I find it's kind of a red herring. So, I mean, oftentimes people who don't know about cryptocurrency will come in with this question. And I asked this question to Gavin Andreessen, the then head developer of Bitcoin, in 2010 when we met at a restaurant in Keene, New Hampshire, as he was talking to us about cryptocurrency, and so that we'd talk about it on the show. And, you know, it was the first question I had. Well, what about, you know, the big one when it comes? Well, that was 2010. It's 2021 now, and it's been 11 years, and I'm still waiting for this big bad thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't have systemic issues, and I appreciate people who are handling, you know, making the network more robust. But if you're stopping getting into cryptocurrency because you're prepping for the big one and you're buying toilet paper and 22 long rifle rounds, maybe you should prep for a future where cryptocurrency takes over too. And, you know, get a little crypto. That way you're prepared. And one thing that Max said I love about gold is I like to they call gold the currency of kings. And silver was the currency of the people. Well, the reason they call it the currency of the kings is because if you have a bunch of gold, some king's going to come along and take it from you, and you're just not going to be able to hold on to it.
Right, and that's all very good points. And gosh, the crisis that we're having right now, though, is unfolding before our eyes, and that's the crisis of runaway money printing. And this is going to cause a lot of problems in 2021. And Bitcoin is a solution for that problem. You know, the the possibility of a global electrical outlet and things like that are, on the periphery of, they're not high probability events. Whereas this money printing, rogue money printing is happening. It's not even a theory anymore. Something like 40% of all the money that the US has ever created in its history happened in the last few years. It's just gone absolutely parabolic. I mean, that's a crisis. And so Bitcoin is a solution right now for that crisis.
And that's one thing that I'm particularly excited about is the paradigm shift that seems to be happening as people wake up to Bitcoin being the safe play. Like for most of Bitcoin's 12 years of life so far, it was viewed as this risky thing that these hackers and hobbyists might tinker with, but it's clearly not for the mainstream. And now when we see how much money is being created and how much fiat is being pumped into the system, I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and there's an unlimited number of dollars that they can do that with. And so suddenly it's starting to shift, right? They're going to Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, Tesla, they're going to Bitcoin for the safe play to protect their wealth. And that's big.